Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I want to talk about what happened over on X today, Twitter, where JK Rowling basically went off. She's had enough. And she's addressing these new hate crime laws over in Scotland that were recently introduced. And they basically extend the different categories to which somebody can be accused of a hate crime. So race, sexual orientation, religion, that's all in there. But now it includes gender identity. So this is the Hate and Public Order Act that creates a criminal offence for threatening or abusive behaviour that stirs up hatred. And it extends the categories to which a crime could be considered aggravated. You know, you might physically attack someone, you're going to get a certain penalty for that. But if you physically attack somebody because of their race, you will get a stricter penalty. So now they've included gender identity as part of that category of aggravated offences.
But what lots of people are saying is that this is going to radically increase the number of vexatious complaints that the police are going to have to deal with, and they're already not able to cope with the demands being placed on their resources. Is policing Twitter spats really the best use of their time and energy?
Well, firstly, there is absolutely no evidence for that claim whatsoever, and secondly, the police deal with vexatious complaints every single day on a whole range of legislation. They deal with those vexatious complaints effectively and sensibly. Let's not take away from the fact we've got a hate crime act in place, implemented in force, because there is far too much hatred in our society. And often those who are the first ones to criticise the act are also the first ones to tell me they have a zero tolerance approach to hatred. So now we've got an act in place, has appropriate freedom of expression safeguards, but also protects people from hatred. It's an act that everybody should get behind.
There are lots of concerns online about the impact it will have on freedom of speech. There are lists being circulated amongst some activists on Twitter today of accounts to monitor. There's lots of concerns that people will be targeted. Is that something that you recognise?
The only concern you should have when it comes to the new stirring up of hate, the new stirring up offences, is if your behaviour is threatening or abusive and intends to stir up hatred. And by the way, even if that is the case, there are some defences, such as the reasonable person defence, and so on and so forth. So unless your behaviour is threatening or abusive and intends to stir up hatred, then you have nothing to worry about in terms of the new offences being created. If your behaviour is threatening or abusive and does intend to stir up hatred against Jews or Muslims or disabled people or gay people, then I think the law should protect those people from who are the victims of that potential hatred. And I think that's really important. So whether what's happening online or Twitter lists that are being created, all of that, frankly, is irrelevant. What is relevant is the threshold for criminality which will apply in terms of the act that's coming into force.
So it's age, disability, race, religion, sexual orientation. Those are categories that we're all used to. But now it's added gender identity. Concerns have been expressed that the legislation's definition of hate crime is too ambiguous, potentially leading to a chilling effect and a torrent of vexatious complaints being made to police. And we've already seen an example of that. JK Rowling herself had the police called on her because she referred to India Willoughby as a man, so-called misgendered India. And India thought that that was a crime and JK Rowling deserved to have the police called on her. The Northumbria police didn't take it any further though, thankfully. And, that was the end of that. And India said something about appealing the decision, even though it wasn't like, a court decision. But apparently India wants to appeal and force the police to do something about it, about misgendering. So yes, JK Rowling knows about this all too well, because people are willing to call the police on her. And she essentially challenged the police to come and arrest her, because she's not going to stop what she's doing, advocating for women's spaces, advocating, for women's sports. She's not going to stop using he, him pronouns when she's referring to India. She's not going to stop. So you may as well come and arrest me now, basically, is what she was saying. But if somebody wants to state fact and say that a male rapist is a man and shouldn't be put into a women's prison just because he decides to identify as a woman at the last minute. Because some of these people, they weren't even living as a woman or anything like that. They just decided to identify as a woman while their trial was going on. They had their name changed and everything while the trial was going on. And then in Scotland, in particular, they ended up putting men into women's prisons just because the man said he identified as a woman. A man who was in there for assaulting women for SA. They decided it was a good idea to put him in a jail cell with a woman. I mean, how disgusting. And of course that backfired. Recklessness at its finest. So over on Twitter, J.K. Rowling is making the very important point that the SNP, all various politicians, it's happening all over at the moment. They seem to be affording more rights to men who identify as women. They seem to be affording more rights, to the transgender community than they do to women. And instead, they're not only affording these groups more rights, they're taking away the rights that women have in terms of being able to participate in sports in a fair and safe manner, having their own spaces, having their freedom of speech. All of that is being taken away from women. They're gradually snatching that away from us. We misgender, now that could potentially be a hate crime if it's classed as stirring up hatred, as they put it. I mean, if you can have the police called on you for misgendering, granted, it wasn't taken any further, but that was police resources and time used because of this, because of gender ideology, essentially. Saying something that offends people who aren't living in reality, as far as I'm concerned. We can now have the police called on us. And it can be weaponized, and it has been weaponized. So on Twitter today, she said, "I'm currently out of the country, but what I've written here qualifies as an offence under the terms of the new Act. I look forward to being arrested when I return to the birthplace of the Scottish Enlightenment." Wow. So she has posted various examples of people who are essentially male predators and how we're supposed to give these people special treatment. We're supposed to be careful of what we say around these people so we don't hurt their feelings. We're potentially risking getting arrested if we do anything that could be classed as stirring up hatred. And we know there's a very, very loose definition of hatred these days. Simply speaking, reality can be classed as hatred. Simply saying that somebody who is male is a man, simply stating that fact, could be classed as hatred. Using terms biological male is hatred, apparently. Saying that you don't think men should be in women's locker rooms, apparently that could be considered hatred. So they're making all these laws, just like over here in the US, how they're trying to redefine Title IX to now apply to men who identify as women, completely disregarding the conflict of interest there. So that means if a man says he identifies as a woman, he's allowed in a women's locker room, he's allowed in the bathroom, he's allowed to infringe upon women's sports. Our lawmakers are giving no thought to what's practical, to what's safe, to what's even respectful and courteous. They're not even giving women the courtesy of giving them their own spaces, of leaving them to have their own spaces. It's absolutely disrespectful. All for people, some of whom fall into the predator category. Some of whom are taking advantage of identity and using it to gain access to women. Using it to be locked away with women, avoiding the prison that they should go to, because these are male predators that you're putting with women in jail cells. And there have been women who have been attacked because of these ridiculous, reckless policies. And now it's been written into law that you dare not hurt their feelings. You dare not say something that they don't like. It's insanity at its finest. So she gave a lot of examples. I don't know if it's going to be YouTube friendly, but I'll read what I can. Lovely Scottish lass, convicted double, you know what? Isla Bryson found her true, authentic female self shortly before she was due to be sentenced. Misgendering is hate, so respect Isla's pronouns, please. Love the leggings. Scottish woman and butcher Amy George abducted an 11-year-old girl while dressed in female clothing. No idea why this was mentioned in court. Of course she was wearing women's clothing. She's a woman. Amy took the girl home and essayed her over a 27-hour period. And obviously, she's using sarcasm in terms of her tone, but this is literally how they address these people. They still use she pronouns when referring to these people. Even with stats, they put the person down as a woman. Even research done by Parliament in the UK found that 70% of transgender prisoners in British jails are serving sentences for sex offences and violent crimes. And you know, the offences, the SAs, are against women. Male to female transitioners are over 6 times more likely to be convicted of an offence than female comparators, and 18 times more likely to be convicted of a violent offence. Statistically, there is no significant differences from other males for convictions in general or for violent offending. And it says more than 74% of transgender inmates are in jail for crimes. And you can see the crimes there. Crimes that include children. So a man who identifies as a woman is 6 times more likely to be convicted of an offence than a female. Yet, they have the nerve to put this person down as a woman, to put this person down as female, completely skewing the numbers and attributing this crime to women. Obviously, we're not responsible for each other's crimes. That's not what I'm saying. But statistically, you're looking at the data and it's attributing more crimes to women. And there's no difference between a male who knows that he's a man and a male who identifies as a woman. There's no difference in the rate of crimes they commit, including SAs and things of that nature. No difference. It's not like they're more virtuous than other criminals, contrary to what they will have us believe, to the point where they honour their pronouns. They allow them in the women's prison because that's how they identify, and we have to affirm them. They're doing all of this, bending over backwards to accommodate these people, these predators. I'm not saying that this is attributed to all people who identify as trans, of course not. I'm talking about people who are predators, regardless. Many of these men are using the policies to simply gain access to women. But when you start saying that somebody can, trans women are women, and you literally treat them as if they are female, to the point where you were willing to put a male predator in a woman's prison. He's in there for RAPE, that's what he's in there for. And you think it's appropriate to put him in a women's prison because he identifies as a woman? Is this somebody who violates women and you give no thought to the women inmates and you put them in prison? You lock them up literally with a predator. It's absolutely sick. It's criminal. Fragile Flower, Katie Dalatowiski, 6'5", was rightly sent to a women's prison in Scotland after conviction. This ensured she was protected from violence, predatory men, unlike the 10-year-old girl, Katie SA'd, in a woman's public bathroom. You've got to be kidding me. Again, this is criminal. The fact that our lawmakers are allowing this. I mean, what do you think they're going to say? Of course they're going to say they identify as a woman when they know that you idiots are going to put them in a prison with women. Of course they're going to say they identify as women. These idiotic policies literally attract predators. It gives them a reason to even go to prison. It actually incentivizes going to prison, for goodness sake. Prison is supposed to be a deterrent. This incentivizes it and literally draws in predators. It's absolutely beyond disgraceful that this has been allowed to happen by people who have been elected, by people who are supposed to be looking out for the interests of everybody. Instead, they're looking out for the interests of predators. So the purpose of this law, I guess, is to afford more protections to people who have certain identities, is to afford them more protections. Meanwhile, the point J.K. Rowling is making is that it's at the expense of women or anybody who doesn't play along with it. Okay, you identify as a woman. That doesn't mean that you're a woman, though. That doesn't mean that you're female. And we can't have you in our spaces because women deserve to have their own spaces. especially when you look at the people who are more likely to be SA'd are women. So having their own spaces is crucial. It's non-negotiable, but they're taking that away and inviting predators, meaning people see these policies and they take advantage of them. Rather than just to be clear, this is male, this is female. We can't even agree on that anymore. And it's leading to real life consequences. It's leading to women being put in harm's way, women being assaulted, women being thrown to the wolves and left to predators. So I'm so glad that J.K. Rowling is shining a light on this. Much respect to her for doing this, because people need to be aware. This is absurd. I'm sure many people weren't even aware of these cases. Even me, who researches these things, who does videos on the repercussions of these crazy policies. Some of these I was not aware of. Maybe I'm more familiar with the ones in the US. It's absolutely despicable. This should not have been allowed to happen. And it's putting women and young girls at risk. But as long as we don't misgender, as long as we don't offend them. And she pointed out this absurd example here, of course, using sarcasm, and excuse my pronunciation. Midrul Wadhwa, head of a Scottish crisis centre, says sexual violence happens to bigoted people as well. She has no gender recognition certificate, but was still appointed a job advertised for women only. Time to be challenged on your prejudices, victims. And of course, she calls out India. Last but least, TV's India Willoughby proves we women can call a black broadcaster a nasty bee who wouldn't be anywhere without woke. Yeah, she did that to Esther. And she pointed out Esther's race randomly, like, what's that got to do with anything? Again, the people who are obsessed with race are usually the racists. Dubbed lesbians men, insult the looks of a female Olympic swimmer, joked about kidnapping feminists, and still gets airtime. What a gal. And of course, had the nerve to claim to be more female than Martina Navratilova. Certain groups are allowed to be as disrespectful as they want to, with no repercussions whatsoever, and still get to play victim, while people who simply don't play along, they can potentially risk getting arrested, risk having the police called on them, risk being accused of a hate crime. Obviously, the people mentioned in the above tweets aren't women at all, but men, every last one of them. In passing the Scottish Hate Crime Act, Scottish lawmakers seem to have placed higher value on the feelings of men performing their idea of femaleness, however misogynistically or opportunistically, than on the rights and freedoms of actual women and girls. The new legislation is open to abuse by activists who wish to silence those of us speaking out about the dangers of eliminating women's and girls' single-sex spaces. The nonsense made of crime data if violent and sexual assaults committed by men are recorded as female crimes, the grotesque unfairness of allowing males to compete in female sports, the injustice of women's jobs, honours and opportunities being taken by trans-identified men, and the reality and immutability of biological sex. For several years now, Scottish women have been pressured by their government and members of the police force to deny the evidence of their eyes and ears, repudiate biological facts, and embrace a neo-religious concept of gender that is unprovable and untestable. The redefinition of woman to include every man who declares himself one has already had serious consequences for women's and girls' rights and safety in Scotland, with the strongest impact felt, as ever, by the most vulnerable, including female prisoners and RAPE survivors. It is impossible to accurately describe and tackle the reality of violence and sexual violence committed against women and girls, or address the current assault on women's and girls' rights, unless we are allowed to call a man a man. Freedom of speech and belief are at an end in Scotland. If the accurate description of biological sex is deemed criminal, I'm currently out of the country, but if what I've written here qualifies as an offence, under the terms of the new Act, I look forward to being arrested when I return to the birthplace of the Scottish Enlightenment. If you agree with the views set out in this tweet, please retweet it. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.